My daughter moved her husband in my house, changed the locks while I was at my brother's funeral, and then sent me an invoice for $240,000 to buy back access to the home I built with my own hands. She even attached a note that said, "Dad, think of it as investing in our future." I just set the paper down, picked up my phone, and called the one person in the world who knew exactly what to do. Let me tell you how I turned their investment into a masterclass in consequences. Before I do, drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. And if you've ever had to draw a hard line with someone you loved, hit that like button. You already know what this story's about. My name is Gerald Holt. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years in commercial insurance, climbing from a claims adjuster in a windowless office in Columbus, Ohio, to regional director of one of the largest independent brokerages in the Midwest. I'm not telling you that to brag. I'm telling you because my whole career was built on one skill: reading the fine print, knowing exactly what a document says and exactly what it doesn't say, knowing when someone is trying to slip something past you dressed up as a favor. I thought that skill would protect me from everything. I was wrong about one thing. I never thought I'd need to use it against my own daughter. My wife, Carol, passed 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to goodbye. She was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday in the extended family, who kept a drawer full of stamps because she still believed in handwritten thank you notes, who made our house on Birchwood Lane feel like the center of the universe. When she died, the house got quiet in a way I didn't know. A house could get quiet, not silent. Quiet, like a radio still on, but the signal drifting out. My daughter, my only child, stepped in. She called every night for the first month. She drove up from Cincinnati on weekends. She helped me sort through Carol's things, and I watched her cry over a cardigan she found in the hall closet. I thought we were grieving together. I thought we were getting closer. What I didn't see was her husband standing in the doorway of every room, running his eyes across the ceiling, measuring the square footage. His name is Troy. He's 41. He sells something in medical device software, which means he wears expensive sneakers to client meetings and talks about disruption a lot. He's the kind of man who shakes your hand while already looking over your shoulder. From the start, I felt it. That low hum of calculation behind everything he said. But my daughter loved him, and Carol had liked him well enough, and I told myself I was just a protective father with a grudge against anyone who took my girl's attention. I should have trusted my gut. About 8 months after Carol died, my daughter sat me down at my own kitchen table with a cup of coffee she'd made. It felt rehearsed. The coffee, the timing, the way she folded her hands. "Dad," she said, "Troy and I have been talking. The house in Cincinnati isn't working anymore. The commute is killing him, and honestly, Birchwood is so much space. You're here alone in 4 bedrooms. We were thinking, what if we moved in? Just for a year or 2 while we save up. We'd split the utilities. We'd help with maintenance, and you wouldn't be alone." I looked at her. I looked at Troy, who was leaning in the doorway like he'd been waiting for his cue. "I want to be clear about something. I said yes because of my daughter, not because I believed a part about the utilities or the maintenance. I said yes because she was my child and I missed having life in the house, and I thought maybe I was wrong about him. Maybe this was just family. Maybe this was Carol's voice, telling me to stay open." They moved in 3 weeks later. 2 SUVs worth of furniture, 3 months of boxes arriving from storage, and Troy's mother showing up on day 4 uninvited to rearrange my kitchen and inform me that the cabinet layout was inefficient. Things shifted slowly, the way things always do when someone is trying to move you without letting you notice. My chair in the living room migrated to the corner. The thermostat went up 4 degrees because Troy ran cold. My dog, a 12-year-old lab named Hector, was suddenly not allowed on the furniture because Troy's allergies. I let it go. I told myself it was compromise. I told myself Carol would tell me to be flexible. Then my daughter came to me about the garage. Troy needed a home office, she explained. The 2nd bedroom wasn't enough space for his setup. Would I mind if they converted the garage? Just drywall and outlets. Very clean. Troy would handle everything. I minded. The garage had Carol's pottery studio, Her wheel was still in there. Her kiln, 30 years of glazed pieces stacked on wooden shelves that I had built for her on our 25th anniversary. I told my daughter that, gently. I said the garage isn't something I'm ready to change. Troy, from behind her, nodded slowly. The way a man nods when he's filing something away. That was November. By January, I noticed Carol's pottery pieces had been moved to the basement. Not broken, just moved. Boxed up. When I asked my daughter about it, she said they were worried about dust. She said the kiln was a fire hazard. She said she was actually doing me a favor, protecting the pieces. I didn't argue. I went down to the basement and I opened one of the boxes and I sat on the cold concrete floor for a long time, looking at a coffee mug Carol had made the summer before she got sick. Her fingerprints were still in the clay around the handle. That was the moment I understood what was happening. But I still didn't act, because she was my daughter. Because I kept waiting for her to look at me and see me the way she used to. The call came on a Wednesday in March. I was in Pittsburgh for my brother Ray's funeral. Ray was 71, heart attack, mercifully quick. I was staying in a hotel downtown, handling the arrangements, sitting with Ray's kids who were grown and grieving and needed someone steady. I was gone for 5 days. I drove back on a Sunday afternoon. I pulled into the driveway on Birchwood and noticed something immediately. The front door had a new lock, not a new knob, a whole new deadbolt assembly, brushed nickel, the kind with a keypad. I walked up and tried my key. It didn't fit. I rang the bell of my own house. Troy answered. He was wearing a fleece vest and holding a mug. He looked genuinely unsurprised to see me. "Hey, Gerald," he said. "Yeah, we had a security situation while you were gone. Someone tried to get in through the side door. We upgraded the system. I'll get you the code." He did not get me the code that day. Or the next morning. My daughter handed me a temporary key card and told me they were still working on getting me set up in the app. The app. To enter my own house. The envelope arrived 4 days later. It was addressed to me. On letterhead I didn't recognize at first, a company called Holt Summers Property Group. That's my last name. Holt. My daughter's married name is Summers. They had made a company, with my name on it, without asking me. Inside was a document, 7 pages, formatted like a legal brief. I put on my reading glasses at the kitchen table and I read every word. The document claimed that over the past 18 months, Troy and my daughter had made significant improvements to the property at Birchwood Lane. It listed them. New HVAC filters. Fresh paint in the master hallway. Landscaping labor. The new security system. The garage office conversion, which apparently had proceeded without my permission while I was at my brother's funeral. The grand total for these improvements was listed at $47,000. But that was not the number at the bottom. The number at the bottom was $240,000. The document argued that due to their contributions to the household, the increased market value of the property, and what they called emotional labor and family caretaking services rendered to a grieving parent, they were entitled to a 40% equity stake in the house. The $240,000 represented the buyout figure I would need to pay if I wished to retain sole ownership of my own home. If I declined to pay or negotiate, the document said, they would be filing a legal claim for unjust enrichment in Franklin County Court within 30 days. There was a sticky note in my daughter's handwriting at the top. It said, "Dad, think of it as investing in our future. We love you." I set the paper down. I looked out the window at Carol's rose bushes, still bare in the March cold. I had planted them the spring after she died because she'd always wanted roses, and I never got around to it while she was alive. And I figured she could still see them somehow. I don't know. It was a dumb thing to tell yourself, but there they were. My daughter and Troy were in the living room. I could hear the television. I did not go in there. I went upstairs to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. I looked at the framed photo of Carol on my nightstand. She was smiling at a beach somewhere in the Outer Banks, squinting a little in the sun, one hand holding her hat down in the wind. I made a promise on her deathbed to always take care of our daughter, to make sure she was never alone, never struggling. I had kept that promise. I had kept it so thoroughly that I had apparently made her believe she could never fail, that anything she needed, I would provide, that my house, my money, my name was hers to claim. I sat there for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called my attorney. Mitchell has been my lawyer for 23 years. He's a quiet man from Dayton who wears the same brand of blue suit in slightly different shades and has a laugh like a door hinge. He is the kind of lawyer who doesn't perform. He just wins. I sent him a photo of the document before I even finished explaining. I heard him exhale slowly. "Gerald," he said, "this is not a legal document. This is a pressure tactic dressed up in legal formatting. The claim for unjust enrichment requires them to prove they acted without expectation of compensation. Since they asked you to split utilities and pitch this as a mutually beneficial arrangement, they have already undermined their own case. The equity stake claim is almost certainly unenforceable. But Gerald, we need to talk about the house itself. Is your name the only name on the deed?" "Yes," I said. "Always has been." "Good, and you never signed anything giving them occupancy rights or tenancy?" I told him about the informal agreement, the handshake deal, the split utilities, which they had never actually split consistently. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Then he asked if I had a paper trail of their missed utility contributions. I had all of it. 31 years in insurance means you document everything. Every Venmo. Every month they were short. Every month they said they'd catch up. I had it in a spreadsheet I'd been keeping since month 3. Not because I planned to use it, but because I'm wired that way. I can't help it. Mitchell told me we had more leverage than they knew. He told me to say nothing to them. To act normal. To give him a week. Saying nothing to them turned out to be the most important instruction I've ever followed, because it gave me time to watch. I watched Troy take a call in the backyard that lasted 40 minutes. He paced the whole time, voice low, hand slicing the air. My daughter came out once to bring him a drink, and he waved her away without looking at her. She went back inside. I watched her face when she turned around. She looked like a woman trying very hard not to show that something hurt. I watched them that weekend when they had friends over. Troy held court at the kitchen island I had installed in 2009. He talked about the house. He talked about their plans for it. He said, "Once we get the basement finished, this place is going to be incredible." He said it like I wasn't sitting 12 feet away, like I was part of the furniture. I watched my daughter look at me from across the room with an expression I recognized. It was the expression of someone who knows they've done something wrong, but has decided the momentum is too much to stop. I understood then that she wasn't the architect of this. She was the co-signer. Troy had built the plan, and she had let herself be pulled along by the current of it because that was easier than standing in it. That made me angrier in a different way. Not at her exactly, at what she had let herself become. On Thursday, Mitchell called me back. He'd done some digging. He asked if I knew that Troy had filed for bankruptcy protection 8 years ago before he met my daughter, a business venture that left 6 contractors unpaid and a legal settlement that was quietly resolved. He asked if I knew that Troy had 2 active civil suits against him from former business associates, both claiming breach of contract. He asked if I knew that Troy's current employer had him on a performance improvement plan as of the previous quarter, a fact that had apparently not been shared with my daughter. Mitchell had a contact, not a pie, he said, just someone who knows how to read what's public record if you know where to look. "This man," Mitchell said slowly, "has been planning an exit from his current situation for some time. He needs an asset. He needs equity. He needs something tangible to show he has resources. Clint, your house is not a home to him. It's a line item on a balance sheet." My daughter didn't know about any of it. I was certain of that. I asked Mitchell what our play was. He walked me through it. Clean, methodical, time for maximum effect. I felt the same cold clarity settle over me that I used to feel in a tough claims negotiation, when the emotion steps back and the math steps forward. There was one more thing I had to do before the legal machinery started moving. I had to call my daughter. Not to warn her. Not to give Troy any chance to regroup. I called her on a Friday afternoon when I knew Troy was in a client meeting 2 hours away. I asked her to take a walk with me. We went out through the back and down through the neighborhood, the same route I used to walk with her when she was little, past the Murphys' place, down to the creep path, under the old railroad bridge. She had her hands in her pockets. The March air was still raw. I asked her how she was doing, not how the house was, not how Troy was, how she was. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Honestly, Dad, I'm tired." I told her I could see that. I told her I wasn't angry at her. I told her the truth. I knew she had let someone else's plan become her own, and I understood how that happens when you love someone. She started crying then. Not a lot, just the kind of crying that happens when someone finally says out loud what you've been trying not to hear. I told her that what was coming, the legal situation, was not aimed at her. I told her that what Troy had done had exposed him, and that she needed to decide very soon which side of that exposure she wanted to be on. She asked me what I was going to do. I told her the truth, everything. She didn't defend him, that was the thing. She just nodded, slowly, and kept walking. The following Tuesday, Mitchell filed a formal eviction notice with the Franklin County Court citing unauthorized lock replacement, unauthorized structural modification of the property, and breach of the informal tenancy agreement through non-payment of agreed utilities. He also filed a cease and desist against Holt Summers Property Group for unauthorized use of my name in a business entity. Troy's phone started buzzing before he even had the papers in his hand. He came to find me in my study. He knocked. I said, "Come in." He was already performing. That particular kind of anger that's trying to look like confidence. "Gerald," he said, "I think we need to talk about this like adults." I looked at him over my reading glasses the way Mitchell looks at hostile witnesses. I agreed that we should. He sat down. He explained that the document was just a starting point, that he never intended to take anything, that it was about having a conversation about the future of the property and their place in it, that I had misunderstood the intent. I let him talk. I did not interrupt. I find that people who are lying fill silence with more lies if you give them enough room, and those extra lies are always useful later. When he finished, I told him I had listened carefully. I told him I had spoken to my attorney. I told him the eviction process had already begun, and that given the unauthorized lock change, and the building modification done without a permit while I was out of state, attending a funeral, we were looking at a fairly clean case. I told him that the civil record from his bankruptcy and the 2 pending suits had been shared with my daughter. He went very still. I told him that if he vacated the property voluntarily within 14 days, I would not pursue the claim for unauthorized construction costs or the business name violation. I told him if he chose to fight it, Mitchell would be delighted to take it to a full hearing, at which point everything on his public record would be introduced as context for his pattern of conduct. Troy stood up. He was trying to find something to say. The sneakers, the fleece vest, the whole architecture of ease and entitlement that he wore everywhere couldn't find purchase in this room. He left without a word. My daughter moved out with him. She had to. I understood that. She loved him, or at least she still believed she did, and the machinery of a marriage is hard to stop mid-motion even when you can see where it's headed. She was cold with me the morning they left. She didn't hug me. She loaded boxes into the car and didn't look at the rose bushes. That was the part that cost me something. I won't dress it up. I stood on the porch and watched them drive away, and the house was quiet again. But this time it was a different quiet. Not the signal drifting out kind. More like the quiet after a long storm when the air is clean and you can finally hear yourself think. Within the week, Mitchell confirmed that the Franklin County filing had been formally acknowledged. Troy did not pursue the equity claim. His attorney sent a 1-paragraph letter declining to contest the eviction. I suspect his attorney had looked at the same public record Mitchell had and done the same math. I went down to the basement and brought Carol's pottery back upstairs. All of it. I put the pieces where they belonged. On the shelves in the den. In the kitchen. On the windowsill above the sink. The coffee mug with her fingerprints in the clay went back on my nightstand next to her photo. I started work on the garage the following spring. Not an office. Not a studio. I kept it as a studio. I left the wheel and the kiln exactly as they were, because Carol had left them that way and I saw no reason to improve on her judgment. I just cleaned it out properly and put the shelves back and let the light in. My daughter called me 4 months later. She was staying with a friend in Cincinnati, she said. Things with Troy had fractured further. She sounded tired in a different way than she had on our walk. More hollowed out, but also underneath it, something that sounded like the beginning of herself again. I didn't say I told you so. Not once. I am not built that way. I said, are you safe? She said yes. I said, do you need anything? She said she didn't know yet. I said, okay, call me when you do. She said, Dad, I'm sorry about the house. I told her that the house was still standing and so were we, and that was what mattered. We talked for 40 minutes, about Carol, about the walk we'd taken in March, about nothing important, about everything. I don't know what comes next between us. These things don't fix overnight. Trust has a long rebuild time, and I'm old enough to know you can't rush the cure. But the line is open, and she's on the other end of it, and that means more to me than anything Troy's 2-page document could have bought. I kept the house. I kept Carol's things. I kept my name on the only door it was ever meant to be on. I learned that protecting someone from failure is not the same as loving them. Sometimes love means letting the structure collapse so they can see what they actually built. I gave my daughter everything she needed to grow. What I couldn't give her was the judgment to choose the right person. That was hers to learn, and she's learning it now. If you've ever had to close a door to protect what you built, you know what I mean. And if you haven't yet, maybe you're watching this because some part of you already knows the door needs closing. Hit that like button if you believe that dignity is not for sale. Subscribe if you want more stories about the things that matter when the noise dies down. And leave a comment below. Tell me about a time you chose yourself. I read every single one. There's a moment I keep coming back to. I'm sitting on the basement floor in the cold, holding a coffee mug Carol made with her own hands. And I'm thinking about every choice I ever made as a father. Every time I said yes when I should have said let's talk about this. Every bill I paid without asking why. Every door I opened because I thought love meant no conditions. I didn't lose my house because I was weak. I lost my footing because I confused generosity with love, and those two things are not the same. Generosity without honesty isn't kindness. It's a slow leak in the foundation. I had been filling my daughter's life with certainty for so long that she stopped learning how to build any of her own. That's not her fault entirely. That's mine. A father who never lets his child feel the weight of a consequence has not protected her. He has handed her a map with no terrain on it. What Troy saw in that house was an old man who had always paid. What he didn't see was 31 years of reading documents for a living. He built his plan on the assumption that I would fold the same way I had always folded, quietly, out of love, out of loneliness. He mistook my patience for weakness. That is the specific kind of miscalculation that ruins people. The truth is, knowing when you're being played requires something most people don't talk about much. It requires the discipline to stay clear-headed when everything in you wants to believe the person you're looking at is who you raised them to be. I had to separate what I felt from what I knew. The evidence was in a spreadsheet on my laptop. The emotions were real, but they were not useful in that moment. I had to use my head when my heart was pulling hard in the other direction, and that is probably the hardest thing I have ever done in a quiet room. And then there's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Staying in it, not folding when Troy knocked on my study door with that practiced calm, not wavering when my daughter drove away without looking at the rose bushes, holding the line when everything soft in you is asking whether you made the right call. That steadiness, that refusal to abandon what you know is right just because it's costing you something real, that's what actually carries you through. My daughter called 4 months later, tired but more herself than she'd been in years. We talked for 40 minutes. That call was not a reward for anything I did right. It was just what happened when the lies cleared out and two people who actually love each other had nothing left between them but the truth. I kept the house. I kept Carol's things on the shelves where they belong. I kept my name on the deed where it was always supposed to be. What I learned is that actions compound. Troy's choices didn't catch up with him on the day Mitchell filed the paperwork. They caught up with him across 8 years of shortcuts and schemes and people he had burned. My choices compounded too. And the ones I'm most grateful for are the ones where I chose honesty over comfort, even when it was slow and unglamorous and nobody was watching. If you build something real, protect it like it's real. And if someone tries to hand you a document telling you that you owe them the wife you built, read every word. Then call your lawyer.